know you're recording because she yells it at you. Great. Well, thanks for joining, Scott. I appreciate it. For this conversation around accountability and administration in theater. So if anyone else joins in, we'll just kind of get them up to speed. But I'm kind of interested in starting the conversation around, like, what do we think are some of the barriers to making greener choices in theater or arts administration? So
I think I think one of the big barriers is artist integrity, whether it's the designer or the director. A lot of them that I've worked with don't want to just reuse what's on hand and want to do something new and interesting. And what's difficult with that is financially, it's reinventing the wheel. And artistically, like you said, I mean, it's wasting material that doesn't then get reused.
Right. I'm wondering also, because sometimes I think of sometimes we're like in a mindset, like I always hate the phrase like this is the way we've always done it. But I think sometimes I wonder how much of that is like, well, we've always done theater this way, so therefore we should continue doing theater this way.
Well, I think go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say in terms of like the idea of like building new for each production or something like that. So.
Well, and I think we all learned through academia, and academia does that in order to train people how to build these things. So sure. We've all been trained in an environment where that's what happened. I mean, my university in the late 80s, early 90s, because I'm really, really old, hardly ever reused things. It was reinventing from scratch almost entirely. And that was because people needed to learn how to build things as well, so that they could then learn the skills to go out into the workplace.
Yeah, that's, I think, a really good, interesting point, because I think even when I was in college, like it was a pretty similar, mindset, whether it's like the actual craft of things or like reinforcing like different like kinds of theater, like because we had a strong and as far as I know, it's still a strong like vocal performance program. So every other year the big musical would be an opera. So like flipping back and forth, or then you like learn about producing opera, which is maybe a little bit different kind of approach or mindset.
Very different, like, right?
Musical theater.
Yep.
So I think it's interesting too when you think of like there's the art form and all the variations of the art form that is like something to learn in and of itself.
Well, and ballet is a completely different animal too. I had the luxury to stage manage ballet professionally in Arizona for a couple years after I graduated with my undergrad. And scenic is drops more than anything else, because you just fly it in, and right. There might be one or two little pieces, but there wasn't stage space for sets.
Well, because in ballet, like the point is that the stage is open, so right. that like you can right. dance. But I mean, that's kind of like when you look at theater history, it was much more of a like, well, we need the forest drop. Yep. It doesn't really matter like which forest we're in, or you just need to convey forest, kind of just right. generally speaking. So
yep. Is that the Into the Wood forest or the Sherwood forest,
or is it like Jungle Book, or yep. Thinking of is it Frozen? Is it a Frozen forest?
Just very different.
Yeah, it's just interesting how theater has progressed in that way of like being more specific to each production and the importance that is placed on that.
Mhm.
Because you think of also how, like, just thinking of like how like directors kind of get like it is like Julie Taymor's Lion King, right?
Right.
You know,
Oh my God.
you know how that
Which
then,
is brilliant.
yeah, and then how that becomes like an iconic, like specific thing too, in and
Right.
of itself. You know, just a way like locally, it's like, oh, I want to see that director's interpretation of that piece. So it's kind of interesting how the specifics of a production really start to make it hard to reuse things sometimes. So,
Yep.
but I'm curious because I know you've started your role at Six Points Theater Company, so just kind of generally talking about administration as well.
Mhm.
Because I know there's like the artistic side of the world, but administratively, what do you think are some of the barriers to making greener choices in like an administrative sense as well?
I'm not having a lot of problems making greener choices. Because I've been recycling, I've been, buying recycled papers, I've been, yeah, I don't know. I'm stepping into the role, stepping into a role. I've been in it 2 months. But I also have lots of things on hand. Because I've been doing educational administration for 22 years, but B, I've been doing theater for 25 years. So something will come up and they'll be like, oh, we need to find a 1980s camcorder. And I'm like, oh, it's in my closet. Like, I have things on hand, so we're not having to acquire a lot of things prop wise. But also kind of administratively too. I'm using office chairs that I grabbed off the loading dock when the university was getting rid of them, and it's what I sit in now at the U or at 6 Points. So
it's kind of like you're living the most like found object lifestyle that you can because you've just like acquired things. Like
yep.
that's like it's kind of like the prop designer's dream, right? To like
Yeah.
have such an inventory that you don't have to, it just makes it easier, right? To just like have an inventory like that. You don't have to spend the time to go look for things.
Right.
But then you also have to have like the space.
Right.
To be able to.
I'm fortunate that we have a lot of space. So
yeah. So but I'm also curious, like what do you see as like an opportunity for like greener choices in theater?
I think the biggest thing would be, and will be, because I know it's one of the initiatives that you're doing, is to, and Facebook already has, is a sharing resources, this sharing resources that happens within the Twin Cities. The Nimbus show that just opened got a prop from it, a major prop piece from it, from a show that closed 8 years ago, because we happened to grab it at the time and store it until it was needed. It's the
I need to know now.
the woman bust from Utopia of Pigeons, a Utopia with pigeons, and they've built it into a telescope for Nimbus's current show that just opened. So
you've kind of described that you've been able to like make greener choices just kind of as you kind of go along. Do you feel like that is partly because you're in an environment that is also very supportive of like green choices, or just kind of inherently gives you enough autonomy to make decisions on your own?
Both. I think my time directing at Chameleon taught me, and designing for Chameleon, taught me to use the resources on hand in new and different ways,
Mhm.
because there wasn't large budgets. And similarly, when I design at Theater in the Round, you know, I know what's there. And it's finding creative ways. I mean, we're talking about theater administration right now, but it's scenically, when we did Love, Loss, and What I Wore,
Mhm.
I found 35 dressers that I found on the side of the road or on Craigslist for 20 bucks that we collected over 6 months in order to build a set out of them.
Mhm.
So I think that it's finding those opportunities where, and getting the director to buy it.
Mhm.
Like I said, the director and the designers are I think the biggest thing that hold these things back sometimes, because
Yeah.
they want to see their vision. And as a designer, I want to see my vision as well. But it's a skill to kind of use resources to find different ways to utilize it,
Mhm.
I think.
With Love, Loss, and what you wore or what I wore. I can't remember the title of the show.
Love, Loss, and
Um,
what I wore.
I wore. You did a pretty good job of also like finding homes for all of those dressers too.
Correct.
Like like in some ways you like saved things from going in the trash, like upcycled them for the sake of the production, and then we're able to actually like find homes for them too.
Right. We actually had a spreadsheet of each dresser as we were renovating it, what cast member or what friend or who was getting it. So,
Right. Yeah.
and the
'Cause I think,
Theater in the Round ended up selling like 3 of them
yeah.
to patrons or to other people.
Yeah. It's kind of like the real live like flea market flip, like in a lot of ways, but you like did it through like the act of making theater, which I
Right.
think is so like
Well,
impact, because like there's so many opportunities to take like old furniture and like
oh yeah, I mean, you know, because you have awards for it, Sadie,
no.
yourself.
So
Yeah, and it's definitely not something I do on a regular basis. But with a show about clothing and Shannon Custer, I presented the idea to her 6 months before the show was going live, and she completely bought into it. I think she in fact has one of the dressers,
mhm.
a dresser that she found on her neighbor's like front steps. So we rescued it from that, we restored it and renovated it, and then got it back to her
Mhm.
so that it's still living in her house.
Mhm. um I want to dig a little bit deeper into what you said about directors and designers kind of being the main kind of people to kind of like make greener choices, because
Mhm.
I kind of think that's true, being a designer myself. Because I've just in conversation like come across people that say like, well, I just don't even know where to start.
Right.
And I think that that's a common, I think that's a, not, it's a good step to self-awareness to
Mhm.
say, I know that people are doing this, but I don't know how. What would your advice be to someone that maybe, because you kind of describe it as like a skill set that you have to kind of like work towards?
Mhm.
Like, what would your advice be to someone if they're interested but just don't quite know how to start making greener choices or start putting their creativity in that um kind of like a workout or exercise. So
I would say step number 1, buy me some coffee or a cup of tea, and I will sit down and have those conversations with people, because I enjoy having those conversations and brainstorming with people on those opportunities.
mhm,
Some of it is building the resources, because like I said, I've been doing theater for over 35 years, but 25 years in the Twin Cities, and I know people So it's if I see something in a show, I'm trying to think. The My Beautiful Infinity I was directing for Theater in the Round, and actually I was directing a Fringe show, and you had just designed the Fantastics, and I needed a bed that could fit 5 different people to kind of jump on top of a bed. So I used your cart from the Fantastics. We threw it in the back lobby of TRP. I spent an evening cutting it apart and reassembling it in a different way, and we used it for the Fringe less than a month later. So A, it's looking for those opportunities, but B, it's building the network so that I can say, Sadie, what are you doing with your wagon after the show? Or Dieter, what are you doing with this table that I can use in 2 months for this other show that I'm working on?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's finding the the show the table that I used for My Beautiful Infinity came out of Classical Actors Ensemble play that he had just designed before.
Yeah. And I think in general, most people are like pretty interested in like, yeah, take this thing. Like
Absolutely, because it's your art living on. I mean, it's something that you created, finding a new life in a different production.
Yeah.
And whether you're involved in that production or not, I think that's awesome. The current show for 6 Points, we just finished The People's Violin, and now we're doing Hanukkah in the Dark, and the entire back wall that Michael Hoover designed, we broke into pieces and we broke it apart and reassembled it to make the back wall for Hanukkah in the Dark. So very, very little new build needed to happen for the next show. It was painting it, wrapping it in fabric in the cases of the 8-foot or 10-foot tall menorah candles that we have. But so much of it was reused. I would say 80% of the set was something that had just come off of the show right before that.
That's pretty. Was he the same set designer for both shows?
Nope. Rick is actually who taught at Normandale. I'm trying to remember his last name. Rick designed the set, but he also, has many, many years of designing sets.
Yeah.
So he was given the challenge of, let's reassemble these. So
yeah,
we made it happen.
That's where I think, as we're talking about how like directors and designers are like the people that are going to make it happen, I think it's also like directors and designers talking to each other about what they're doing.
Yep. Absolutely.
Because like what you've just described of like one designer seeing it and like flipping it, like I can't think of an example right now, but like, only because it's been like 2 years of a pandemic, right? And like I haven't done theater in 2 years per se. But when you see something and you think, and you like talk with the person to like figure out like, how did you do that? Or like, how can you reuse it? Like that's also like just the first step of like building that relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
To, like, move forward too.
And for me, a lot of it is, with Dieter, I went in to help him assemble something for Classical Actors Ensemble, which is when we built the table that I was then like, oh, I'm building this thing for you for this show that I can use, so it's having a wide enough group of people that you work with that work at enough different places. You work all over town as a designer.
As you were describing, like seeing things in shows and then like thinking of how they can be used in other productions, I was actually just at Lyric walking through the furniture storage, and I actually saw, because I did a steampunk Christmas carol there, like that was like 5 or 6 years ago now, but
Okay.
the Ebenezer Scrooge tombstone was still upstairs in the in the storage. And I was like, I think I designed that. The technical director was like, you did. And I was
You
just
did, and
like,
we're keeping it.
yeah. And it's just like that, I think, is also part of like, even if you make like show specific things, like I mean, the idea of like an Ebenezer Scrooge headstone being used again is probably like a pretty common idea. But like also thinking of like the other elements of like, does the table that you're designing have to be so specific that it can't be used for other productions? Like,
Right.
it kind of goes like, the like designing specifically kind of goes both ways in terms of like it has to be like this, but then
Right.
it's also like the thought process of like, but if I tweak it a little bit, then it just inherently can be used more
Right.
too, because like if you're putting the time and effort into making something.
Right. And the thing that I used Dieter's table for was actually an Ursula Bowden design, because she's the one that did My Beautiful Infinity, that I directed at theater or at Chameleon. So, you know, it was a table that had built-in casters under two of the legs so that they were hidden, and you could pick up one side of the table and then with one hand move it to wherever you needed to move it. So, I mean, that is a fairly specific thing, but also can be used in lots of different ways. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, so kind of, I mean, you and I have worked together enough that we kind of know our styles a little bit too. And I'm just kind of curious, when you see other people creating theater and things going in the trash, um, I'm just kind of curious, like, um, what you think that, like, how that process could be different for people that do continuously throw things out, if that makes sense, or like,
Well, and dumpsters are expensive. Like getting rid of things costs money as well. So not only are you wasting the money by not reusing that item, you are needing to pay to actually have it taken off of your hands.
right.
In most cases. So I think if theaters can work up the networks in order to share those resources and pass them off. And I know that a lot of the local high schools do. Like I said, in Facebook, there's a very active Facebook group of, you know, oh, we just finished this show. Like, who needs this? Oh, I'm thinking about doing that next year. I'll take it now. Oh, but so-and-so's doing it in the meantime. So give it to them, and then they'll give it to me, and we'll pass things around. I mean, I think that they, in a lot of ways, the high schools have found the right way to do it around here anyway. So
In the way that they have like kind of an established like network of communication.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And there's also kind of like a similarity of plays that they produce too, or like
Correct.
productions that they do.
Correct.
Because it's like with high schoolers graduating, there's a little bit more of a kind of routine turnaround nature to things. Well. So,
yeah. Every 4 years you can do the same play.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting when you kind of think about how like certain stories are retold as well, just in terms of like there's always the like, oh, suddenly everyone's doing Little Shop of Horrors this year. No one planned it, but suddenly we all kind of thought it was a good idea. Like,
right. What's happening in the world, or what, you know, what activity in the world spawned everyone to go, let's do this.
Yeah.
I've been saying for a couple years now, I've been saying I want to do The Mouse That Roared. But now with the insurrection just happening, you know, I think The Mouse That Roared and a little country trying to take over the United States of America would be a wonderful hysterical comedy to do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Are there any resources that you feel the Green Theater Alliance could create or generate to make it easier for other people to make greener choices?
I know that you're working on some of the networking and building those relationships among people. Oh, Kit's here. Hi, Kit.
Hi.
So I think it's building that, having a storage place where things can go for the 4 or 5 months that they can before they get needed again.
Mhm.
That would be a great asset to have. So
Great. Excellent. Thanks for joining us, Kit. We're just kind of chatting a little bit about various like ways to make greener choices. And I am recording this for the Green Theater Alliance YouTube channel. So I don't know if you want to maybe, I don't need to put you on the spot, but I'm just kind of curious, like what you're interested in learning about in terms of like green theater choices.
Well, I've been interested in it for a while. A couple of years ago, I spoke to some artistic directors in town about, because I was aware of the problem with waste disposal for photo, what do you call it, film, for headshots, and all this waste that would be produced by these headshots that, and I think the industry has, I'm not getting a visual here, which is really weird. I'm just hearing you, but anyway, but so we started this thing called green casting, where basically you could just print out your headshot on recyclable paper or cardboard. I think that I'm losing my words here, but the material in which the photo stock, it has become there is some photo stock that is that doesn't have the chemicals that were so bad for so many years, and also may or may not be recyclable, but it's not the cheaper kind. So I know that Pro Rata, I suggested that they this to them, and Karen Broughtley did implement green casting there, and I think also 10,000 Things. So I was concerned about waste and chemicals. So that was my just after, from just some background in not an expert, but some background in environmentalism, and also just noticing the piles and piles of headshots, and people would throw them out afterwards, and they'd be, I think a lot of people are using virtual now, especially since the pandemic, So I've been out of the theater, I've been out of the sort of production loop for a while, so I don't know how they're handling that, but
Yeah.
that was my initial interest. And
Yeah, the paper in auditions and paper in printing scripts has also come up in our directing and our stage management conversations. So
yeah,
there's definitely some tools that people are implementing
yeah,
to like go greener around that. So I think that's I think the chemical piece that you bring up, I think, is a really good piece to highlight, because there's so many chemicals, not only in the things that we print, but I was chatting with someone that was like, you could just do a whole like conversation around like makeup and like what it does to your skin, and then like when it washes down the drain, like what it does to the ecosystem. And I was like, wow, I never thought about that, but you're 100% right. Like,
yeah, and you can purchase. I mean, they're more expensive, but you can purchase makeup that is far less. First of all, it doesn't use animal testing, and then also is far less toxic. There's also things like hairspray that's really, really bad for, and the air, and a lot of them, at least, and there may, again, I've been out of the theater loop, and there may be developments in products, but so that sort of thing is little changes that we can make.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, is there anything, any initiatives or anything that you think the Green Theater Alliance could take on to kind of help people make greener choices in theater?
I mean, the reduction of not just photo stock and the headshots, but paper, and the less paper you can use, the less the more you can go virtual, the for things, the better. It just is, you know, and also just recycling materials. There's so much. I think it's much better now than it was, where you know, there's just so much lending and reuse of costume and scenery materials than I think there used to be, you know, 10 years ago. So recycling is a really, really great thing, you know. Why, you know, anyway.
Yeah. Scott and I were sharing some stories of some specific things
Mhm.
that are, you know, pieces that have kind of tracked through shows that we've interacted with on some level. But
Well, and the other thing, I mean, going back to the paper, we've been trying to use mostly digital scripts,
Yeah.
and not print out lots of scripts. But paper wise too, I'm shredding lots and lots of things, and
Yeah.
I have about 3 leaf bags full of shredded paper that's ready for the next, you know, decoupage, not decoupage, but you know, the next time we have to build a tree or
Yeah. I
so
mean,
I have
yeah,
things on hand.
you know, I mean, the ideal in my mind is like that you don't, we don't throw anything out, you know, we don't, you know, add to the problem, and we keep exchanging between, you know. And I don't know what the networks are. I mean, I guess that would be a really, I would suggest for the, I mean, this is probably what you're doing, is having real communication between the different theaters and the different theater groups, and having, so that nothing goes to waste and everything as much as possible can be reused, you know, not throwing things out, having someone, you know, and some of that's already taking place, and you know.
yeah, we're pretty lucky in Minneapolis that we have the Twin Cities Theater on a budget, because there's some cities that are just establishing
Mhm.
that. And that Facebook group has been around for a while.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
I don't know how long, but I feel like as long as I've been freelancing around town, there's been
Yeah.
that Facebook group. So
Yeah, I mean, I still see things like the postcard printing for Fringe and stuff. You know, if we can do without postcards, I don't know. I mean, maybe just or gloss anyway, and just put them on, you know, recyclable paper or something like that, cut up or something. You know what I mean? That's that sort of thing. The more, just being aware of that.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The paper also comes in because I also think of how much mailers go out.
Oh
I know
yeah.
that's something that came up in the directing conversation, is specifically around like fundraising and how much
Yeah.
mail goes out for fundraisers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, Scott, I'm kind of curious, like,
Just so you know, the Minnesota Theater on a budget was
Mhm.
created August 21st, 2011. So 10 years.
yeah, that's about how long I've been around. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, that's good to know.
Yeah, fundraising is a whole thing as well.
Yeah.
It's nice with, you know, Give to the Max that we can set up a campaign and let people donate electronically. This year
Yeah.
I even sent the thank you letters for Give to the Max Day electronically, so that we reduced the paper there.
Mhm.
In general, when I'm getting paper check donations, I need to turn around a physical letter,
Sure.
and with a handwritten note and stuff as much as we can. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And you know, I mean, right now, I don't know. We're it's so weird with the pandemic, and I know that there's other concerns, but eventually, you know, if we can start thinking about implementing solar, and even having solar panels in spaces as much as possible, you know, that'd be good.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because I'm about a week away from finishing a 2-year architectural drafting program. So
Mhm.
I've been exposed to more kind of architectural schools of thought.
Uh-huh.
And I took a sustainable construction topics class last semester, which is like kind of a really big like eye opener for me of how other industries are doing this so much better
Mm.
than theater already.
Yeah.
Like the LEED certification process, and like how even existing buildings, like it definitely takes like a plan. Like you can't just be like, we're just gonna be LEED certified. Like you gotta work at it. Like it is,
Oh, yeah.
it's like a thing to brag about because it's hard to achieve.
Yeah.
But I know that Minnesota Orchestra's building is LEED certified.
Mm-hmm.
I think silver certified on some level. And my wiener dog Phoebe is very proud of that, obviously, so she's got to show her support. But maybe that's something that we can kind of take on as well, is helping connect venues to resources of like how to become LEED certified or something like that, or how do you write a grant to get a solar panel for your building. I know
Yeah.
that pros and cons in
Awesome.
both directions with solar in Minnesota.
Well, I
Well,
know that.
and the not Minnesota State Arts Board, I believe, yeah, it was Minnesota State Arts Board held a online meeting that I attended in August or September, where we talked about getting solar panels for nonprofits and the grants that are out there. And they had a couple of representatives that were explaining kind of the process of where to go and so on and so forth for nonprofits. But those conversations, I'm not sure if it was through Minnesota State Arts Board actually, or yeah, I think that it was though. I don't know.
Yeah.
But those conversations are happening,
That's
because
great.
I was involved in at least one of them. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's probably going to happen is that, you know, the companies, you know, the Guthrie and the Children's, you know, the people who have huge budgets and everything will probably be able to move to a more green, you know, I mean, in these larger ways in terms of restructuring the building and architectural changes and that sort of thing. And the you know, this is a mostly non, you know, I mean, it's mostly smaller theaters that are just going from place to place and whatever space they can afford to use. So that's something. It's just going to be, you know, usually it just seems to me that what happens is that, well, you know, I mean, there's just the places that have a lot of money and can be more on the cutting edge, and it's so that one of the concerns is how to help support the smaller independent, you know, theater groups that usually rent spaces to lead them to rent or to help them find maybe even spaces to perform that are, you know, more environmentally friendly.
In our lighting conversation, we talked about how, like with lighting specifically, like so many of your green choices are made just by which venue you pick to work at. Because like if there's a theater that has more LED fixtures than another, just by working at that theater than another one, you are, you know, theoretically on a topical level, automatically making greener choices. So it's interesting how much the buildings that we are in dictate that, just like inherently as well. And another topic that has come up is kind of found space theater or site-specific theater. Yeah. And so I think it's interesting also when we're in like the season selection process of like right from the beginning of like choosing to do a production, when you can start making greener choices like right away by saying like, we're going to do site-specific, we don't need a set.
Yeah,
decision
absolutely.
made. So Scott, I'm kind of curious kind of your opinion about like green choices in relation to season planning.
Well, the two season planning committees that I've been on both have set theater spaces. I was on Chameleons for 5 years and chaired it for 2, and then I joined TRPs 6 months ago now. But both of these locations have a specific space that they work on. When I'm looking for venues for my space or for theater spaces for Segway to rent out. I haven't done Found Space as much as I've done theater venues. But I'm open to it. I think Found Spaces are absolutely awesome, the shows that I've seen in them. So
Yeah. But our climate makes it hard. I mean, I think on the
Right.
coast, on the West Coast, you know, you can perform out there, can be stay outside a lot longer, you know, perform out, because outdoor performances are great, you know.
Yep.
I'm designing a show down in Florida this January. And when we were, I was like, oh, I'm so excited to go to Florida in January for a show. But when we were talking about the impact of COVID, a theater in Florida just inherently has different kinds of outdoor
Yep.
theater opportunities year round that we don't necessarily have in Minnesota.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Tucson
As
as
we
well.
just-
Yeah.
As we
Yeah.
just like experienced like a 4-degree day yesterday. When
Yes,
you
I'll be-
say,
Go
when
ahead.
you say Tucson, Scott, do you mean like the other end of it is that it's so hot and dry that it's not comfortable to sit outside?
No, I'm saying that the summers you don't want to be out unless it's after dark. But I'm going down in January for the Tucson Fringe, and looking forward to seeing a couple of the shows that are in Found Spaces. So
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I bet it's really perfect at night in the winter. I mean,
it's perfect all the time in the winter. I'm usually in my shorts. I was down there last year from February, or this year, from February through end of April. And I'll be down there for most of January this year. So,
oh, lucky you.
yep. Well, that's where Emma lives now, Kit. So,
Oh,
One thing that's kind of come up in our conversations kind of around green theater choices is this idea of a certification process. We've talked about LEED as a way that like buildings can be certified, and there's different certifications that we're used to seeing out there. As an organization and as individuals, how do you think people would respond if there was like a green theater like certification out there? Like, this production is green.
I think it would. I mean, actually, this is something that Pro Rata mentioned when they with the whole green casting thing is, you know, it can help them get grants. I mean, if they, you know what I mean? It looks good, but I guess it would depend on I don't know, on the theater and who's running it and what their interests are.
well, and I think that's then something, if you're doing that certification,
Yeah.
then the Green Theater Alliance should build a network that they then let patrons know what shows that are happening that are green certified, or build a mailing list that then they can help publicize shows. Because if you can help a theater get an audience or a bigger audience, they're going to work with you in order to get access to that mailing list.
And you know,
I can tell you that.
well, and also, you know, I mean, if we, I really think that, you know, there's, I'm a DFL worker and organizer. You know, there's a lot of groups in town organizations. Indivisible has a climate change group, and the DFL has a climate caucus, and you know, they'll help you. I mean,
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like there's groups out there that will absolutely help build that network. But if it's a marketing network, then I think that
Yeah.
you're going to get more buy-in from a theater to become certified if there's that carrot for them.
Yeah, but I mean, also they can help you get audiences when they, you know, they'll put a little plug in.
Right. That's
Yeah. Oh, that's what you meant. Yeah.
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 I hadn't thought on it that level in terms of like the Green Theater Alliance connecting with other green organizations to help like get information to those specific groups. So that's a really good suggestion. I
Yeah.
can see where that would take some legwork over a couple years, but
Well,
I
I
think
think
it's a really good idea.
If you got a certification process and you got some theater support, I mean, it can help you with the connecting to, I'm pretty active in these circles, so I can help the connection. if that would make contact with green organizations, non-arts organizations.
Yes,
That,
I will definitely take you up on that. So I'll send you a Facebook message or something so we can chat more about building that network on that side of things too. So
what do you think about theaters? I mean, the big, well, like Ordway or the ones that have, or the Hennepin Theater Trust. Do you think there's that they're approachable?
Well, I think Hennepin Theater Trust doesn't produce its own work. They're bringing in road shows. So they don't, unless they're doing something original in-house,
Oh,
it's not something that they're, I mean,
okay.
and they were talking about doing that with the Hennepin, the building that's kind of kitty corner to the state and next to the Orpheum. They were looking at making a performance space
Oh,
on the 3rd or 4th floor that then would have in-house or things that they could produce, theater companies could produce work in.
I think they just had something like there's a Brave New Workshop. I think they just Hennepin Theater Trust just took them over, and I
okay.
guess they're going to provide some sort of venue for them. So I don't know if that's the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
your question was, do we think that those organizations are approachable with this topic? Well, I worked at the Ordway and the Guthrie, so I know a lot of folks that work there. So I would say, yes, I think they're definitely approachable. I think that it's interesting to me because I've worked in so many theaters of so many different sizes that it's fascinating to me how some of the problems are all the same, no matter what space you're in, no matter what your budget is, no matter how big your staff is. So I think that these questions that we have are the same questions kind of any organization faces, kind of regardless of scale. It's just that in some ways they have more of a ripple effect or more considerations to kind of think through, which I know being in a large institution can, like, having been in that role of, like, I was in human resources, which is like very bureaucratic inherently. And like seeing the kind of change that you want to happen and knowing how long it takes can be really just frustrating, just because there's so many processes that are in place that sometimes before you can see the effects of a change, it'll be 2 years down the road, which sounds really hard sometimes, but sometimes, when you are season planning 2 years out, that just is what that reality is at the same time. So I definitely think that those organizations are approachable. And that's why I hope that just by having these conversations, though, it has, I just said ripple effect like 3 times, I think, but I hope it has a ripple effect kind of across the cities, kind of regardless of size, and just kind of gets everyone thinking a little bit differently about, no, we really do have control over our choices. Because I think sometimes when you just kind of like surrender to like, I don't have time to like think about another thing, it's like, you actually do. Like, you actually can find time for some of these choices. Like, how do we have to send like everything on paper? Like that is a choice to make. So.
And yeah, I think, and if I don't know if this is possible, but to start small, if you have a bullet, I mean, if you can come up with a bullet list, or we can come up of, these small measures, stuff like that, like the paper and other things that theaters can do, I mean, we can just put out, I write for Minnesota Playlist sometimes, we can put out an article and just does to generate attention and interest and have, everybody's concerned about climate change and about the environment. So
I'd like to think that everybody is, but I'm not certain that everybody is, but it will affect all of us. So
Plastic bottles going into the ocean. I don't know anybody working on a project about that.
Actually, I just hauled a bunch of plastic bottles to a theater about The Little Mermaid. Yeah, I think, yeah, climate change is just like such a, I don't know, just with the last year we've literally had with some of the strange weather, it becomes harder not to see it as such a like, this is really starting to affect us. Like the price of corn was insane this year. So, because there was so little water in the rain, but
Yeah.
Although Arizona got more water this year than they've gotten in what, 25 years. So
yeah, well, that's why I think in some ways it's the phrase that I hear a little bit more frequently is like climate instability.
oh
Not
yeah,
just-
no,
yeah.
no.
Yep.
So, but cool. Well, we've been chatting. Well, Scott and I have been chatting for almost an hour.
Oh,
Is there is
yeah,
there
I'm
any
sorry. I was at another meeting. I thought I'd get off earlier.
No worries. It's all kind of this Zoom world. You can just kind of pop in and out. Are there any other kind of topics around like green theater things that we maybe haven't chatted about that are kind of like on your mind, or maybe like topics that are like large enough that could be like an entire workshop or something of that level?
Oh,
I think a brainstorming session, I mean, like Kit was saying, working with who else can come to the table, or what other organizations outside of theater
Mhm.
can have already battled some of this that we can also,
sure.
you know, jump on.
yeah. And I think I can be of assistance there with the, I mean, honestly, I'm sort of out of the loop of the theater world, except as a critic. So I haven't, you probably know, you guys obviously can bring in those people. And, but yeah, I'm happy to connect to connect with other environmental organizations and even get their suggestions outside of the, regular environmental organizations dedicated to climate change. Yeah. But brainstorming, I mean, do you have a list of theaters that have expressed interest, or do you guys have a?
I have a sense of like theaters that are interested just in the way that these conversations have started, which is part of the reason I wanted to start with like a series of community conversations. Because even when people maybe haven't been able to make it to a specific night, they say, oh, I'm actually really interested in this topic, but I can't make it tonight. There's been conversations here and there, but I think at an organizational level, I haven't done anything like organization to organization. It's been a lot more kind of like individuals having conversations, if that makes sense. So, but I do think that there is definitely like a space for like the individuals and the choices that we make as individuals, bringing those people together, but also like organizations coming together and working, because I think you in this kind of like when we're talking about climate crisis, I think that there is no silver bullet. So being able to provide resources to individuals, but also resources to organizations, I think is going to be an important thing to balance kind of going through this. So.
Yeah.
We all have very like pensive looks on our face right now.
No, I'm just thinking of next steps. I'm always thinking of next steps. That's just
yeah. Well, there's
organizing.
definitely going to be more conversations as we get into 22. I just kind of wanted to like listen and absorb, other people's ideas too, because I didn't want it to just be like, I have some ideas, because to me that's like not entirely the point. I think we have to engage everyone in this conversation if we're going to see some change that's going to benefit everyone. So
I think some sort of casual survey of like, would you be, I don't know, contacting theater, where do you go through the, what part of the artistic directors or the company managers, or how do you do that? Who is the person, who is the contact in a theater organization?
Well, that's where I think it's kind of interesting that I think it can happen on a couple of different levels. I think it can be a traditional like top-down approach, but I think that in the way that we've already talked about like small green choices along the way, I think if there's a staff member in an organization that's really interested, I think part of that is that even if someone isn't at the top of an organization, they can help institute a lot of change around the kinds of processes that we're talking about, that I don't think have to be derived specifically around like a specific job title. Because many of us theater folks wear many, many hats.
What?
What? So yeah, I've always kind of liked an approach of work with the willing. So work with the person in the organization that is most interested in the topic.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, great,
Yeah.
great approach. Yeah.
So
I was trying to think. I'm currently working with 4 theater companies.
Oh my goodness, really?
So,
yeah, and I think
So,
like in that way too, like I think of like my own relationship to different theaters, because like I'm on the board of some theaters, I'm a freelance designer on some. And even though like inherently by having a different job title, I have a different sphere of influence, I can still like ask green questions that are appropriate to whatever level that I'm at. Because I'm working on, like I said, the showdown in Florida is a very kind of like traditional, realistic kind of show. So it's just harder to make some of those choices when you're like out of state doing kind of
boy.
like a hyper realistic show.
Yeah.
The thing that one example I can give, I was emailing back and forth with the props person, and there's a bit in the show where one of the characters is spraying herself with static spray because she's like nervous that her like clothing is going to be like clingy, so she's like nervously spraying herself. And the props person like sent me an image of like, oh, here's some static spray, and I was like, maybe it doesn't have to be static spray, like maybe we can find like a
compressed air. Compressed air.
Yeah, and just like put a label around it so we're
Yep.
not spraying an actress with chemicals unnecessarily, but also introducing chemicals unnecessarily
Into
Absolutely.
a theater space. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's where I think, even though, you know, in the grand scheme it's maybe not the greenest show that I've ever designed, there's still those opportunities of choices in every production.
Yep.
So
Seems to me that there's a lot of chemicals sort of floating around inside, you know, in productions and stuff, you know, but I don't know.
Well, and the current equity contract is that you have to get air filtration at 0.1 microns. So
Oh,
so there's not a lot of chemicals flying in any area that has equity in it.
although, yeah,
this is
Which-
probably the
which-
cleanest the air's been
Yep.
in a
Yeah.
lot of our lifetimes. So.
Yep.
yeah. But then not, you know, not every theater is equity. So,
That's true.
That's
Yeah.
true. But I think that that's also where like certain kind of factors of the industry can help us set a certain kind of standard or expectation, where it's like, well, just because we're not equity doesn't mean we can't like filter the air a little bit or like make choices that, even if we're not doing it to the, what did you say, 0.1 micron?
0.1 micron, which is most air purifiers that I was able to find on the shelf is 0.3. So I had to custom order things from medical supply companies. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if you can't go to that level, even just making the greener choice by like not introducing the chemicals in the space is like the step in the right direction.
I mean, there's also things like, you know, energy use and stuff, and making sure the
Yep.
lights are turned out, making sure that you don't, oh, you know, as much as possible that you're using, I mean, what you're
LED
talking about,
bulbs. Yep.
LED, yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, you know, yeah,
Mhm. And water usage too, I think is a
water
big one.
usage.
Water
Yeah.
usage is huge.
And things like laundry. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, how often do costumes have to be cleaned before the cast goes crazy? You know, because I mean, I don't know, but you know,
Depends on the
point-
show, but but I know TRP even got a new washing machine that is conserves water too.
oh, that's
So,
great. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
So they do the washing right there in the
Yes.
building. I see.
Yep.
Okay.
I think at the end of a production, there might be certain things that are dry cleaned, but I think the bulk of it is pretty
Yep.
much in-house.
Yep.
And another small thing are, cleaning, what cleaning products are you using? Are they, are they,
Ammonia-based or, yeah,
yeah,
Mhm.
or green chemicals that are then getting, or, yeah, chemicals that shouldn't be in the environment, but also going down our drains.
yes.
So,
Sounds like a
Great.
good
Well, this has been
conversation.
a great conversation and I look forward to more. I think I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording at this point.